Thank you very much for joining me today. We got a great topic here to talk about maximizing profit with supply chain optimization software. I think we know a little bit about that, don't we, Sujit?
Absolutely. We have worked in this area for quite some time, a lot of different industries. So happy to talk about it.
That's fantastic. I have a list of questions for you today, and obviously, if anybody out there who's listening today has additional questions that they want to ask, just put them in there for us, and Sujit and I will get to them, and we'll talk about it. So thank you very much for joining us today, Sujit. As usual, I'm going to jump right into it. Let's start with challenge many companies are facing right now. How do you drive profitability without investing in new infrastructure or resources?
Yeah, I mean, any company with their existing footprint wants to maximize the revenue that they can get out of it. And in turn, of course, they want to do it in a profitable way. So not only do they increase the revenue, they increase their margin. And most of the time, that requires making more product, meeting more demand, and doing it in a cost-efficient and cost-effective way. And when companies approach this, there are basically two main lines of thought. One is to expand the capability. When you expand the capability, by that I mean you may want to open a new factory somewhere. When you do that, there's an optimization technique around that, which says, what's the best place from a revenue perspective, labor cost perspective, taxation perspective. And so that whole science is the strategic network design. And of course, there's a place for that. But that's typically a 4, 5, 6, 10-year long horizon.
Right.
When we are looking at existing facilities, I got my plants, they are running, I got my DCs, I got my customers. How do I optimize this? And for the maximization of my profit. And so in today's digital world, very often that is done through models where we are basically saying, can we build a model that optimizes the throughput, maximizes the throughput in the most cost-effective way possible for us to meet the demand. However, while that is the more literal interpretation of optimization software, related to that is now the idea that you're running things off of live data. You are getting the data feeds cleaned up, which can have its own benefits because, data is more expensive to clean. The longer you wait, the more expensive it becomes to clean it because there's so much mess that it creates. So there's data optimization, data process optimization, there's business process optimization. There's a lot of automation that can happen, which means that reports that used to take me 3 days to run, I can generate that deck for my management in 5 minutes. So all of these are benefits that can accrue, and eventually all of that goes towards your margin. So that would be my answer. That with the existing network, it is possible to do a lot more in a lot of different industries if these types of optimizations can be made within the company.
So how do you see supply chain optimization software helping companies make the most of what they already have?
Well, in order to address that, let's kind of look at the landscape from which they arrive into this discussion. So very often when the people are asking this question, they are coming from the mindset of using Microsoft Excel or spreadsheets to do their planning. And in these spreadsheets, they might be an expert within the company who knows the spreadsheet in and out, but they typically remain a one person, maybe a small group related tool. The data processes are mostly manual. The formulas can have errors in them. There's studies that say that Excel spreadsheets can have a lot of errors in them. So someone who is coming from this kind of a landscape, when they come to a software solution-based landscape, they are now talking about integrating the latest and the greatest version of the data directly from ERP or the MES system. They are talking about setting up a supply chain command and control center like Archiva's Beacon. where we set up the process of what they should do during which part of the month. And then, of course, there's the optimization model itself, which says, how do I maximize whatever my objective is? In this case, it could be a composite objective of maximizing margins while minimizing inventories and maybe minimizing stockouts or maintaining a certain service level towards a customer. So these could be multiple objectives that you put into this model. And so companies that arrive from that Excel mindset to put their heads together into listing down these objectives, listing down the data sources, listing down or noting down their business process, and then map them into the new software. But because the software is a step change, simultaneously then also map the new and the better way of doing things. So not only do you go about implementing software, you implement process changes side by side because the new software actually enables it. And when the companies do those two things together, they get the most benefit out of these types of problems.
Yep, understood. Running in parallel. What do you think are some of the immediate steps businesses can take to optimize their supply chain, and boost profitability without a real major investment?
That's a good question. When you use the phrase major investment, I translate that to mean setting up a new factory. That's typically the major investment, right? In many cases, that can be tens of millions of dollars, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. We work with a lot of chemical companies. The spend to set up a new plant could be easily $100 million.
Sure.
So you have the plants that you have, and now you are asking the question, how do I optimize? This becomes then a question of how to most effectively use your resources. Where is the least cost option for meeting a particular demand? Are there planning decisions that can be made to streamline how you run the operations? Let me use an example. I learned this from an ex-customer of ours, Paul Johnson.
Yeah.
He's now retired, but he was a VP supply chain at Hexion. He said that they had just put up a brand new factory in one of his businesses, and they had 5 old factories. And let's just say, out of quote unquote respect for the new factory, they were only assigning the best products. By that, I mean the highest moving products to that new factory. All the little bits of the demands for products that were in smaller chunks were left on the older plants. When they ran the optimization, they found out, for example, that the best way to run it was to move all the smaller demands to the new plant and let the older plants run in a steady one product mode for the most part, because the old plants were prone to breaking down. The changeovers were taking longer.
Right.
The new plant was actually much more adept at the changeovers. It would not break down as much. So this paradigm shift only came about when they opened their mind and ran their optimization model with an open setting. Because the first few runs was run in the mode of how can we replicate what we do today? But eventually they came to the point where they said, let's open it up. So a lot of value actually comes in, not just from the installation of the software, but from this idea of letting it give you some suggestions outside your comfort zone. And for that, you need to run the model in a somewhat open way, and have an open mind about interpreting why it's doing or suggesting that you do things a particular way.
Okay. A lot of companies I talk with, to Sujit, they're always asking about, real-time visibility, automation. How does real-time visibility and automation contribute to profitability?
I mean, let's talk about the real-time visibility. In planning world, there is a word we use, nervousness. So if your plan is really, really real-time and you have no mechanisms in place to keep the plan steady, sometimes it can be positive, but at the same time, it can be a negative because the plans are changing all the time. So when we use the phrase real-time visibility in the planning world, we don't necessarily mean all the time that it's a second by second real time. We may mean that we don't want to do an update once a month, which is the old, when you go back 10, 15 years, people would do that. Maybe once a day, maybe once every 2 hours type of real time, right? So let's just define that first. Regardless of that definition, the idea that you have the pipelines built in where you are updating and working your plan with the latest data means you have visibility to the latest orders from the customers. You have visibility to what was made 2 hours ago, so your inventory positions are up to date. You have visibility to how much particular machine is running. Is it running at the average rate? Is it running slower? Is it running faster? All those types of things. So
Right.
the real-time data, or as real-time as it makes sense in the planning world, really enhances the output of your planning model and your optimization model. And so in that sense, it typically creates a bigger and a better margin for the customer.
Fantastic. I have a few more questions for you. Over the years, you've always told me that a business can't improve unless they measure it, right? So what's the fastest way to see results after implementing supply chain optimization software, Sujit?
That's a good question. I mean, I think like anything else, just implementing the software magically does not change the world. So you have to get into the mode of, even before you do implementation, hey, what are the 3 things I'm interested in improving? And as I was saying earlier, have an open mind when you run these models to say, is it, if I don't force it to do exactly what I was doing yesterday, what does it suggest? And does that nudge me in the right direction as far as those important metrics are concerned? The other thing is, it's very important in these types of projects, it's very important to load the current way of working. So let's say if I have a plan today, going into the project, I may have a sense that this is a very good plan. But once we build a model, we can load this plan and evaluate how good it is. And we may find that there are surprises. We thought that we were getting X kind of revenue or X kind of margin from the current decisions, but when we load it into the model, we find that it's a slightly different number. The main thing with loading these existing plans is that it allows us to compare the existing plans with the new plans vis-a-vis those KPIs that we have decided are important to us. So then you can make an objective decision about, is this really better? And if it is better, in which areas it is better, in which areas it's not. And if that means that we have to tweak our model, so be it, right? So that comparison, the sooner the companies get into, the faster they will get to the improvements. Sometimes I see companies will just force the hands of the model into kind of mirroring what they have been doing for the last 10 years. I mean, that's a sure shot recipe of not getting any gains out of it, or very minimal gains. Yes, you have automated the data feed, so in that sense, it's helpful.
Sure.
There's some process improvement, but if the whole model you have, handicapped it by creating very hard rules to just replicate what you've been doing last 10 years, you will not really see a whole lot of benefit. So that would be an opposite answer to your question. Don't do that. Rather, have an open mind. Let the model have some flexibility in suggesting.
Right.
I'm not saying you accept them with your eyes closed, but
Sure.
at least you evaluate.
Fantastic. You and I, we talk a lot about large companies because we do work with large companies, but, I also talk with a lot of small and medium businesses. So how can small and medium sized companies apply these strategies without significant new investments?
Well, that's a good question, Jeff. I don't know. Very small companies in general, let's just say, have, they still have to graduate for the most part from a firefighting mentality.
Yeah.
And so very small companies may find it difficult to gain value out of optimization. Now, once they are past, let's just say $100 million mark, they are big enough that they are beginning to think in planning terms. Right now, that's not a magical number. Some $1 billion companies are still firefighting.
Sure.
And some $10 million are very much doing planning. So again, it's not a magical number, but there is a point at which a company graduates from firefighting to saying, hey, it's too much work. Let us do something better. when they decide to think in those terms, that is the right time to think about graduating from their Excel files and implementing something a little bit more structured and follows some good processes. Maybe you can call them best of breed processes or best practices, if you will. And the idea then becomes we are interested in this improvement. Typically, companies will do some experimentation with Excel and so on, but eventually they will begin to put together some requirements, as they should, as to what are the things they are trying to improve. And then go through a software selection and implementation process with those things in mind. What I see sometimes, again, as a negative way of doing this, or not something that I would encourage, is companies would not focus on the 3 things they want to improve, but focus on the 50 features they want in the software. And
Exactly.
I find that it's very easy to check the box of the 50 features, but not improve a thing. So really, for small and medium size, and really for any company, if you want to improve in this area, you better focus on the KPIs and the metrics you want to improve and put that front and center. That
Sure.
here where we are, and our intention is to improve this by 5 or 6 or 10 or 15%, and then measure it diligently to make sure you have those improvements. Don't worry about the feature function set and what I saw from this vendor or that vendor. Those things are important, and as long as you can connect them to your goals, no problem. But don't just have a list of 500 features and don't make your selections like that.
Great advice. Thanks for sharing that today with us, Sujit. We've talked a little bit today about maximizing profits using your existing resources by optimizing throughput, improving collaboration, using real-time data. The only thing I can say is if you want to learn more about this and Arkiva solutions, we encourage you to book a demo. Sujit, thank you very much for your time today. We appreciate it. I look forward to our next conversation.
Thanks, Jeff.